Good morning, Berks County. Happy summer to you in the city. We are going to be taking a little time this morning and talk about something we have not featured on our show before. We're going to talk about the issue of deafness. In our generation, this brat generation that I talk about all the time, we are experiencing various manifestations of old age, and none too happy about it. This week's Newsweek actually had a feature story on hearing loss. So that Woodstock generation and the iPod generation are looking toward a middle age or maybe even sooner of hearing loss. What we're going to talk about this morning, though, is not the people who have done this damage to themselves, but there is a tremendous population, it's been brought to my attention, there's a tremendous population in our own community and worldwide that have been dealing with absolute deafness and silence from the very beginning of their lives. So today our topic is going to be about American Sign Language, socializing in silence. Whenever I have to talk about something new and interesting that I don't know a lot about, I defer to a friend of mine. She's a woman who has been an educator in every sense of the word in our community for a long, long time. So this morning joining me is Miss Anne-Marie Heilman. Good morning.
Good morning,
I'm
Patti.
so happy to have you back here again. You always bring me something fascinating to talk about.
It's a real pleasure.
And we got together, and I was talking with you, and we were talking about this issue of hearing loss, and you said, I have a remarkable person in my circle, and I think you should talk to him. So I'm going to just introduce this gentleman right now. Please help me welcome. This man is an interpreter for the deaf, and his name is Jim Schneck, and I'm so happy to have you here with me this morning, Jim.
Pleasure being here.
I'm so glad that you're here. Annie, I'm going to let you start, because tell me a little bit about what brought the two of you together and exactly what kind of, what your involvement is in this.
Huh?
What
No.
your
I just couldn't resist that. You know, I'm just being myself.
No stopping it, folks.
Well, actually, I started to take American Sign Language a few years ago. Well, actually, it's more than a few. It's about 10, because of my special ed background. And once I took one course, I got so interested in it, I took 2 and 3 and so on. And first of all, I am not good at it, so I want to say that right up front.
Okay.
But in special education, it's become the second language, especially working with kids who have MR and kids who have autism,
mental retardation. Okay.
And also children with autism. There was a brief study not too long ago that pointed out when you use American Sign Language, being that it's a motoric act for the most part, and not just the hands, as a lot of people think, it's a whole body language, it seems to have feedback on the language area of the brain. Now, in special education, we've known that a long time. However, I don't think the general public did, and now that we've had this tremendous increase in autism, and we are now able to establish language with kids and establish it early. Okay, that's all this new research in the last 10 years has just expanded the world for kids with autism, and of course for their families. In my position down at RAC as coordinator of special education, we have been trying for some years to get a solid program together, and we are now working on a certificate program because we have 4 American Sign Language courses, ASL 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we're going to add a couple others as well. And over the course of the years, we actually were able to, looking out different places for instructors, we made contact with Mr. Jim Schneck, who I have to say has one heck of an impressive resume. It's very difficult, and I'm sure Jim will talk about this, to find a person who signs so well that they can also teach it, but also has a master's degree to teach it at the collegiate level.
It's a remarkable collection, just like inspired by Phil Donahue. Every time I have a show where there's occasion, I like to bring on an author. Jim is the author of the Complete Idiot Guide. We've seen these everywhere.
Co-author.
Co-author of the Complete Idiot's Guide to Sign Language. In talking with Jim on the phone, I was amazed. You told me some amazing things in the first 2 seconds that we met, and I want to ask you a little bit about how you got into this. But the most amazing thing you said to me is that sign language was illegal.
That's right.
Sign language was illegal, and this is more than a physical problem. This is a psychosocial problem that goes
Big
all
time.
over the place.
Yes.
Jim, tell me about, there's so many things to touch on in a short show. Tell me what started you on this. You are not deaf.
That's right.
You are a hearing individual, and you've been at this for some time. What made you want to do this? Tell me how you got into this field.
Well, to make a long story short, I was befriended by a deaf woman and her husband and her family as a youngster. And they included me into their family, and I learned the language from them by being around the deaf. And I felt very welcomed and accepted by this particular family. And as a result, I wanted to be deaf. I didn't want to be hearing anymore. They were my people,
Fabulous.
my language, my culture. Embarrassingly, I admit, when I was 17 years old, I stuck chewing gum in my ears, hoping I'd become deaf, because that was my world, my people.
And the best people that you knew
That's right.
up to that time were
They
deaf?
were my friends.
That's
And I
fascinating.
became very immersed in deaf culture and in the deaf community, and learned to my whole world opened up to a whole new perspective on human rights and the abuses of human rights.
How did you
especially in the
go
deaf.
about making, so your hook was that there was an injustice
Very much so.
that no one seemed to care about.
That's right.
And nobody was complaining, were they? There's a tremendous
That's correct.
population of people in this community, is there not,
Yes.
Annie? And we don't know about them.
Because you're not part of the community, it's like a subliminal thing. People just don't pick up on it unless they do some signs. And all of a sudden you start noticing those people in the corner and their fingers are moving. It's one of those things. And if you don't have a voice, literally, how can you make your needs known?
Exactly. Exactly. And ultimately, do you not get to a point, perhaps, of saying nobody cares, so why? It's almost a self-perpetuating problem. They don't get the attention, can't communicate. Tell me a little bit. Tell me a little bit about your work and what you're doing right now, because this is a really specialized area. Now, you've written this book. How did this come about, and how? What a process this must have been for you. And is it possible? I guess the main question I have is it possible for anybody to learn sign? Is there just one sign language that everybody knows and talks? Talk about this a little bit, because I think people, occasionally will watch TV and they'll see someone's hands flying around. It's been recommended to me that, because I have a kind of a hand issue anyway.
I know. Well, they tied our hands.
And I've been fascinated by it. Someone actually taught me, I was a bartender for a little while, and I had a customer that was deaf, and he kept wanting to communicate with me, so finally one day I just wrote down A, B, C, and he talked me through it, and you retain a little bit of it. But tell me a little bit about is it possible for someone to learn sign, for anyone to learn it? What do they learn? And tell us a little about the whole sign language culture and community right now.
Oh my, I could speak about this for hours. So to condense it, yes, it is possible. It is possible to learn the language, but it's a challenge. It takes work, it takes effort. There are some people who learn it well and some people who just never seem to learn it. It's like learning a foreign language. It takes 5 to 7 years to become fluent in the language, and then additional years of training to learn how to interpret the concepts from a spoken language to a visual language. And in this country, the primary language the deaf use is called American Sign Language, but it is not English, and it never will be.
So when we see an interpreter on television, is there a standard? Is American Sign Language the standard?
No. There are many, many different variations, and there are many accents in sign language. I have an Ohio accent in sign language. The deaf here make fun of my Ohio twang.
Seriously?
Because I
How
sign
can they?
Ohioan.
Oh, now come on.
I do!
Oh, now
I
come
do.
on.
All right, give me an example. Here in Pennsylvania, deaf people sign table. In Ohio, we sign table. Here in Pennsylvania, they sign delicious. In Ohio, we sign delicious. Here in Pennsylvania, they'll sign the numbers 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. In Ohio, it's 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. In Pennsylvania, they'll sign squirrel. In Ohio, we'll sign squirrel. So there are accents and very interesting pockets of dialects of sign language all across the country.
That's interesting to refer it to as an accent.
I remember once being in a conference in Virginia, and I was signing to my daughter at the time, and she was cranky and fussy, and I was getting frustrated, and I finally said, "What do you want?" Not knowing a deaf woman across the gymnasium floor from California was watching me sign. Later on, she came up to me and she goes, "You're from Ohio." I said, "How did you know?" And she said, "Well, she caught my accent. Time for what? That's an Ohio sign for what. Here, it means where. But in Ohio, that's what." And she caught that, aha, I'm from Ohio. By that, my accent gave me away.
What a marvelous sense of recognition and acknowledgement it must be to have someone be able to just observe that.
And I can watch deaf people, and within a few minutes I can tell what part of the country they're from by the way they sign. Because signing was illegal in this country for about 100 years.
What was up with
From
that?
1880 to around 1980.
Why?
It was totally illegal in all schools for the deaf, in all schools in the whole nation. The idea was that deaf people have to learn to be hearing, learn to talk, learn to use your voice, learn to overcome your deafness. Sign language is a crutch. It's bad. Don't do that. That's bad. It's not a language. It's for inferiors. You've got to learn to overcome your deafness, learn to talk, learn to be normal, learn to speak. That's a good intention, but in reality, it was disastrous for the deaf community.
Well,
that
it
has done
was a physical
so
impossibility,
much damage.
was it not?
Very much so.